It's often said that the bonds you make in a rowing crew will be bonds that will stay for life. Here, in the loft of my house, I have found my old Latimer rowing vest. And it's true to say that I'm still in touch with a number of my crewmates from actually my very first squads as a J14 and 15. One of those has followed a similar path of his career to mine, and he now runs a club in Portland, in Oregon. Nick Haley, a very good friend of mine. We've stayed in touch over the years. He's also the junior US national team manager. And during these strange lockdown times, he was in touch with me through Zoom and said, how about we have a couple of webinars with each other? I can interview you about the British rowing system, and I said in return, perhaps we can discuss the American system for the Pangbourne cruise. So, two old Latimerians, both still obsessive about their rowing, both getting together, neither of us wearing our Latimer Upper School vests. Welcome to the latest Pangbourne College Rowing Lockdown webinar.
Why don't you start with, you left Latimer Upper, and
I did.
and flew back to your
Gloriously.
homeland. You're still
Yeah,
alive.
I did A levels, and I had selected a few universities that I was interested in the UK. But what it really came down to was the fact that I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I felt like the American university system provided a little bit more flexibility. It enabled me to kind of feel like I could go in and do a little bit more growing and developing and figuring out what I wanted. I kind of thought that I wanted to do something international. I had a really great experience being in the United Kingdom and traveling around Europe and beyond. And so I went to a university in Washington, D.C. because it had an international kind of bent to the program. So it just felt like the right fit to me. And so, yeah, after A levels, I went there.
And how much of a part in going to Georgetown did your coxing experience actually make?
A little bit, but not that much. And that's because the Georgetown program, while it is a good program, is not particularly well funded by the school. So in other words, the school, there are some universities in the United States that athletics are very, very, very important. At Georgetown, the basketball team is very, very important, but that's about it. Right. And so the rowing program, was full of athletes who worked very hard, very smart about, their training and very dedicated, but it wasn't a particularly well-funded program. It still isn't a particularly well-funded program, although it's a little bit better now. So the coaches really couldn't do that much. They were interested. They talked to me. They certainly wanted me to come, but in the end, I don't think that they really had very much impact in, my application process. Unlike, for example, the University of Washington, who, their program, probably most people have heard of. They're probably the best program in the United States, arguably. And I applied there, and the head coach told me to send my application to him, not to the school. And then he told me that I was in, and told me that he had reserved me a dorm room above the boathouse. At that point, the rowers lived literally above the boathouse. Yeah. And that sounded great to me. It didn't sound so good to my parents, who said very wisely, if you go there and your dorm is over the boathouse, you will never actually go to class. Yeah. You will just stay at the boathouse the whole time. So a wise decision. I don't regret, even though, I think an experience at the University of Washington would have been unbelievable. I had a phenomenal experience at Georgetown. So.
And then from Georgetown, what came next?
Well, after Georgetown, I needed a break from rowing, and I had an opportunity to go down to Buenos Aires in Argentina and teach in a school down there for a little bit, for a year or more. And it was actually exactly what I needed in terms of the rowing, because I was able to kind of take a breath and realize that I really missed it and I wanted to be associated with it. I hadn't come to the point where I thought I'm going to be a professional coach, but I knew that when I came back to the United States, that I wanted to get into a club and maybe do some coxing and some rowing. So while I was in South America, my mother and father moved to Portland, Oregon. And so when I left and came back, I came to Portland, Oregon because I was coming to visit my parents and they had all my stuff. So I came to get all my stuff. And I started studying for the law exam. The thought was that I was going to go to law school. And while I was studying for that exam, I got involved in a rowing club and kind of realized over a few months that the thing that I was really looking forward to when I got up every day was that. And, very quickly they kind of said, well, would you like to get out in the coaching launch and try a little coaching? And so I'd done a little bit of coaching at Latimer, as you know, and as a coxswain in university, there was a fair amount of that anyway. So it just kind of flowed naturally. And then I just got into it and I just realized, I don't have to be in a hurry. I don't have to rush off to law school. I can do this for a year or two. And then a year or two turned into, a career. So that's the way that went. And
then that became ORU.
Yeah. So I got my job at Oregon Rowing Unlimited. And at that point, I've always worked with juniors. I worked with adults a little bit there in the first year or two, but didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I enjoyed working with the juniors. The program was very, very small. Literally, there were probably 10 people, if that. And so, over the first 3-4 years, we built it up, and to the point where there were over 100 athletes, and we were starting to gain some good results, both locally and nationally. And so I spent about 10 years building the program up at ORU, and then was presented with an opportunity, a facility in downtown Portland, about 3 miles away from where I was working, right in the heart of the city. The city was renovating a building, and they wanted to put a light water sports center in. And so it was an opportunity for me to, kind of start my vision of what a program should be, and be the director of that program. So I shifted over there, and that was 2004. So I've been there ever since.
And we won't go into the tear-jerking transition from that facility to where you are now. Suffice to say, it's been a roller coaster and many life lessons, I guess is fair to say, is it?
Yeah. I mean, like anything else with politics, they got us in for very cheap, and then abandoned us basically. And so, now we are, and there is some good news because I think we are making some progress on a facility, but right now we're kind of in a temporary facility, aiming for, a permanent home that will be a multi-million-dollar facility, knock on wood. But there are a bunch of different clubs involved in the project, probably more than 1,000 rowers in various clubs. So it's a big project, and it will be really important for the city of Portland, just whether the politicians realize it or not. And so we're hopeful about it. But right now, no complaints. We're still able to get out on the river, but right now the boats are outside, and we're kind of right now there's no rowing at all. But this year has been a tricky year. Yeah.
So let's move on to, we've already talked about the British system. In a potted version, how do you go from joining your club to representing the US junior national team?
Yeah, so the biggest disadvantage I think that the Americans have is that the country is so big and so spread out. And so, what you described in the British system was kind of fairly frequent gatherings of the people that were really in contention. That does not happen here in the United States. So the first time that there's any kind of collection, we do talent identification camps in each region. So in the Northwest United States, that's 4 or 5 states, primarily Washington and Oregon are the places where they're rowing. But we will have a talent identification camp, which is just a 1-day camp in Seattle in February, and everything else will be based on your ERG score.
Right.
So, and coach's recommendation to a certain degree, but there are so many programs and so many coaches that I think the selectors, they really, they have to struggle to be able to come up with something that's fair. In the United States, everything has to be democratic and fair, or people get sued. So, so it really comes down to the ergometer score gets you in the door. Talent identification camp is mandatory, and we'll see whether or not you can row your way out of a paper bag or not. But it's literally a 2-hour session, and after that they'll put out invitations, and they'll have an 8-week summer camp, which may well be the first time. It's probably the first time that the 30 or so boys or 30 or so girls get pulled together, and so they get 2 or 3 weeks of just kind of seat racing and different combinations, and then they'll start to cut kids and send them home, and then they'll form the boats up. But by the time we get to the World Championships, the crews will have rowed together for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That's it. And for many of the crews, they will be from all over the country and will have never even met each other before, never heard of each other, never seen each other. So anytime that we can bring back the core of a crew, to another World Championships is fantastic, because it really is double the amount of experience that they otherwise would have. It's not a great system, unfortunately, but it's the nature of the beast, given the country is so spread out.
Yeah, and we talk when we're over in Boston at the long distance trials, and some crews have travelled the day before from Scotland to come down to it. We're only talking about, 600 miles.
Right.
That's the same as your regional camp. That's as far as anyone would have to travel to get together. Yeah. And although it's, with the exception of probably the bigger boys' sweep boats, they tend not to have more than a couple of people from any one school or club rowing together. Yep. We have, say this year, it would have been a really long run into the Junior World Championships, because the crews would have been selected in July, and they're not racing, they wouldn't have been racing until almost the end of August. So that brings its own challenges, because at the end of a long summer regatta season, where people have raced generally every week from the end of April through to the beginning of July, it's quite a long slog. So it would have been managing the athletes quite carefully, I think, would have been quite hard, and the coaches, because it's a long time to coach one boatful.
Well, that's why you and I have stopped coaching and are more managing, right? Because it just, I don't know how many years. I've been with the junior team now for over 20 years. And, after 10 or 12 years of, 8-week, 9-week summers, it was just, I couldn't leave my club alone for that period of time anymore. It was just too much to ask my assistants to do it. It's a big, and it costs a lot of money. The American kids, a kid that's going to go to the World Championships, by the time it's all said and done, has probably spent $10,000 through the selection process and through the camp. They probably spent about somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000.
And how much of that, this leads quite nicely on to the question about universities, how much of that buys them a better university slot? I suppose if you're a female,
yeah, absolutely. If you make the junior team, the chances are very good that you're going to get recruited. If you're a female, the chances are very good that you're going to get a scholarship to college. Depending on the college that you want to go to, you may get a full scholarship and not have to pay anything, or you may get a partial. But if you make the junior team, it's very unlikely that you won't get recruited and that you won't get a scholarship. Very, very unlikely. For the guys, if you make the junior team, you will get recruited, but there's far less money available in the university system for scholarships for the boys.
Yeah. So as you know, I've had a chat with Bill Manning about recruitment, or the process. Given that we haven't got a huge amount of time, what would you be advising your boys and girls, men and women, if they come to you and say, I want to go to, let's say, Washington for the men, or Stanford for the women? How do I get in? What
Yeah.
tips can you give?
The first tip always is make sure you know what you're signing up for. So it's really important, because it's very easy to get kind of swept up, especially if you go on a visit. They're very, very good at wowing you. They have wonderful facilities, and but the reality of it is that if you're rowing out of Washington, the commitment is extreme. I mean, they have Olympians in their second crew. Right. So the level is extremely high, and the expectation is extremely high. So, I've had athletes go there and just get ground down, because the work is so significant. So the first thing is, you've got to go in with your eyes open. You've got to really know what the expectation is, and you've got to know what you love about rowing. If you don't love training, if you just like racing, you're toast. You're going to be done. Right. You have to love training. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I always tell my athletes, if you're dead set on going to Stanford, then go to Stanford. And what that means is, if you're not ready when you're 18, then take a gap year. But it is a formula, and it's not a mystery, and it's not luck. If you want to get into one of these schools, you've got to check their boxes, which means, if you're 6'6", maybe, as a girl, if you're 6'6", okay, if you're 6'3", right, as a girl, and you're going 705, you're going to get a really good look, right? But if you don't get in and you're 6'3", take a gap year and go 650, then you're going to get in, unless your grades are awful, right? But I've had kids go to community colleges for a year because they didn't get into the program that they wanted to get into. So they go to community college, which is a lot cheaper. There's a couple of community colleges in the United States with really good rowing programs. So they do their first year effectively, train really hard, show them they can get a faster score, show them they can succeed in a university environment, and then all of a sudden they become much more attractive. So it really comes down to how bad you want it, I think. Coaches really, really respond to athletes that can show that the fit is a good fit. So the coaches are very intelligent. They realize that if you're not happy in the school, you're not going to be happy in the rowing program. And I'm sure Bill probably said something like this. Bill and I are good friends, and they very much, the smart coaches are looking for the right fit. So the more you can kind of convince them that you've done your homework and that you really are a Stanford person, and not only the rowing program, but the school program, that this is what I want to study, this is what I bring to the table, and the more attractive they're going to be, right, to you. So that's really important. And then also kind of hustling. I think they get so many emails, particularly the Stanfords of the world, any of those top echelon. They have coaches they're just recruiting coaches, like Bill is one of the best. But their job most of the time, they'll spend a couple of hours a day in the launch, and then most of the time they're on the phones, they're on the emails. They have to process so much information. So I always tell my athletes, you just keep sending stuff. You just keep sending stuff, because I talk to coaches all the time that will say, part of it is, we just want to see if you're going to give up and disappear, right? If you're really interested, or if you're not interested. And so part of your job is to show them, I'm serious about your school. You've got to write them letters that show them that this is specific. I'm not putting out a form letter. I'm not just trying to throw a big net and see who I catch. Like, I really want to go to Harvard, or I really want to go to Texas, and you've got to really get that across to get their attention. Now, the good news is that, British rowers have a very good reputation for rowing well. So, as much as it pains me to say, the European rowers are probably going to have a little bit more flexibility with the erg scores because of the reputation of rowing well. Right. So, whereas my athlete may have to show that they're able to go 7:10 if they're going to get recruited by the Stanford women, your athlete might be able to go 7:20 or 7:25. don't hold me to that, but that's, kind of my observation.
Right. Well, 7:35 might be aspirational for some of them, but
Well, and this is it. This is it. I think what's really important to understand is that there are so many universities in the United States now that offer rowing and that offer scholarships, that it's really easy to get. You look at the results of the NC2A championship and you say, okay, well, there's 6 schools, there's 7 schools that really matter. There are lots of schools that the athletes can get a really, really good experience and get a full ride scholarship. And there's, Stanford just can't. They have 20. That's it. That's all they can do. So it's gonna be a 7:10. It's gonna be a 7:05, and there's no way around it.
And I think Bill made a very good point, which was, don't come to the States just because you want to come to the States for a rowing scholarship, because at the end of it, what are you going to do? Because you've got to go back home, and if you've got a degree in something random from a random university in the Midwest,
Right.
what's that going to actually give you afterwards? Because you might have a great experience for 4 years as a university student and do some nice rowing in a nice setting, but that's not what's going to build your career. So have a plan in place. And I think that was really, really wise words.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to that is the level of research that those recruiters like Bill are doing, because they are not going to bring someone that has a vague plan to Princeton University, right? They want to know that you really have a plan, and that Princeton is part of that plan.
Yeah.
Because he knows that someone that goes in that's vague, that just kind of wants to row, that's not the kind of person that's going to survive in that environment. Academically, Princeton is very, very rigorous, right? So if you're not going in there on a mission, you're not going to make it.
No.
Right. So
sound advice. I'm conscious that we're short of time.
Yeah.
And
I do it again sometime.
Yeah. We could probably talk without anyone being interested for hours, and have a great time,
including our own friends and family.
Let's finish with a question. When you get someone who's close to your top boat, but not quite there, what's your stock phrase that you give them? They've got another year. What sort of encouragement would you give them to make the step up? Where do people most fall short?
Yeah, I would say it comes down to how focused and how efficient they are, because we have, our practice schedule is that our practices are 2.5 hours a day, 6 days a week, which is significant. Now, 2.5 hours includes get there, change clothes, get to the boats. So, on the water, on average, I would say we're probably doing about 90 minutes. But that means that, my top crews are doing 15 to 20K a day, right? Depending on what the workout is. If it's a long swing row. So they're putting in a lot of meters. There's no reason, if you're doing that and you're doing it effectively, that you shouldn't be in really good shape and moving the boat and generating scores and all the rest. 9 times out of 10, the athletes that are coming down and coming to practice and spending the time but not getting those results are missing the point about whatever we're doing. So they're not focused on the water, and so they're not improving their technique, or they're just inefficient, or not plugged into whatever the training is. So a lot of the athletes will come to me and say, well, I think I need to start lifting weights, or I need to get some extra time in here and there. There's plenty of time in our practice schedule to be exceptional. And I have plenty of athletes that are going sub 720 as girls and sub 620 as guys, right? The ones that aren't making it are either just haven't taken enough strokes or aren't asking the right questions.
Yeah.
They aren't putting their attention in the right place. It really comes down to that focus. The lightweights will beat the heavyweights because they're just, they know how to concentrate better, or, they're more effective in the water, or they just train better. they're better teammates. But we try and talk about all the different aspects to putting together a good team, whether it's nutrition or how you talk to your teammates or how you learn, how you keep track of your data, how you take responsibility for your own development. We give them all those tools, but very few of them utilize all those tools as well as they could be. And sometimes it just takes time to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the ones that really make a decision that I want to be in the top crew and I want to do it now, as soon as they start kind of just implementing the tools that we're giving them effectively, they make it.
They step on. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We could almost do this every week.
I know. We should.
We would.
That's probably the best thing about this period, this virus thing, is that I think that this Zoom thing and everyone realizing how valuable it is great.
Yeah.
And by the way, I do individual conferences with my athletes about university all the time. I'll do half a dozen a week with parents and all the rest. I am quite happy if you've got athletes that are seriously looking at the university in the United States. I'm happy to do Zoom call with their parents and talk to them about that stuff, because the parents have a role to play in it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm afraid I'm going to have to go and make the dinner.
All right, good. Say hello to your girls for me.
I will do. They were quite disappointed actually not to be included in this chat. They were, "Why? What's going on? This you can't just talk to Nick. We should be part of this." But Joe's been sending me a message saying, "Let me know when you're finished so that we can come into the kitchen again."
Yeah, I'm starting to get emails and texts, and you probably heard. So it's like that now. It's time to get back to work. So
exactly. Well, have a good day.
Yeah, stay well, mate. We'll talk soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope in the years to come you won't find yourself locked in your loft because your family are fed up with your stories of your rowing childhood. But if you are, maybe you'll be able to dig out your old vest, hark back on the times when the winds were perhaps not quite as great as you remember them to be. I hope you've enjoyed this lockdown webinar. Come back again for another one soon.